The moment Adriana Varelli heard her husband call her a lifeless decoration at his own gala, something ancient and furious stirred beneath her perfect mask. For 3 years, she'd been the silent wife, the porcelain doll in designer gowns who smiled on command. But Dominic Rinaldi had forgotten one crucial detail: dolls don't have pasts. And the woman he married used to own the night. By morning, the entire underworld would know the truth. The Mafia boss's obedient wife was dead. In her place stood Nix, the ghost racer who'd never lost a race or forgiven a slight. If you're ready to see how far a caged predator will go when she finally breaks free, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The Castellano Grand Ballroom dripped with old money and fresh blood. Crystal chandeliers worth more than most people's homes cast fractured light across marble floors, illuminating a carefully curated collection of monsters in $1,000 suits. They called it a charity gala. Everyone knew it was a power summit, the 5 families gathering under one roof to measure their influence, negotiate territories, and remind each other why peace was more profitable than war. Adriana Varelli Rinaldi stood exactly where she was supposed to stand. 3 steps behind her husband, silent as a shadow, visible enough to be admired but never heard. Her champagne-colored Valentino gown cost $40,000. She'd never chosen it. The diamond choker at her throat, a wedding gift from Dominic, sat heavy as a collar. She'd never asked for it. Even her hairstyle, swept into an elegant chignon that exposed the graceful line of her neck, had been selected by Dominic's stylist that morning. She was a work of art, a museum piece, something beautiful to be displayed and never touched. "Your wife is exquisite, Dominic." Marco Castellano raised his glass toward Adriana without actually looking at her. "Where did you find such a treasure?" Dominic's hand settled possessively on the small of her back, the only physical contact he'd initiated in months. "A gentleman never reveals his sources, Marco. Let's just say I have excellent taste." Adriana's smile never wavered. It was the same smile she'd worn at 100 events like this. Perfectly pleasant. Completely empty. Inside, she counted tiles on the floor, calculated the distance to the nearest exit, cataloged the makes and models of luxury vehicles visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Anything to survive another 4 hours of being invisible. "She doesn't talk much, does she?" This from Vincent Moretti, underboss of the Chicago family. He circled Adriana like a buyer inspecting livestock, his gaze clinical. "Beautiful, obviously, but a bit still, like a photograph." "My wife understands her role." Dominic's voice carried the particular pride of a man showing off a prized possession. "She doesn't burden me with unnecessary conversation. Honestly, it's refreshing. My first wife never stopped talking." The men laughed. Adriana's fingers tightened imperceptibly around her untouched champagne flute. "A decorative wife," Marco mused. "Smart choice for a man in your position. No drama, no complications, just beauty and silence." "Exactly." Dominic turned slightly, finally acknowledging Adriana's presence. His eyes skimmed over her face without really seeing it. "She's perfect because she knows better than to have opinions about business. Don't you, darling?" It wasn't a question. It was a script, and Adriana knew her line. "Of course." Her voice came out soft, refined, utterly devoid of personality. The voice of a woman who'd learned that silence was survival. Dominic returned his attention to Marco, already dismissing her. "It's like having a beautiful piece of art. She stands exactly where I place her, requires minimal maintenance, and never causes problems. A lifeless decoration, perhaps, but an effective one." The words landed like physical blows. Lifeless decoration. Adriana's smile held. Her posture remained perfect, but something fundamental shifted behind her carefully constructed facade, a hairline fracture in glass that had been under pressure for too long. 3 years. 3 years she'd suffocated herself to fit into this role. 3 years she'd buried everything that made her real, vibrant, alive. And this was how he saw her. Not as a person making sacrifices, not as a woman choosing silence to keep the peace, as a decoration, as nothing. The conversation moved on. Trade routes and territory disputes. The usual territorial pissing contest disguised as civilized discussion. Adriana stood in her designated spot, the perfect accessory, and felt the careful architecture of her constructed identity begin to crumble. She'd been someone once, someone who mattered, someone who didn't need permission to breathe. The memories came unbidden, visceral, the roar of an engine pushed to its absolute limit, the smell of burnt rubber and high-octane fuel. The electric rush of taking a corner at 140 miles per hour, so close to losing control that the line between death and transcendence disappeared entirely. The weight of a wrench in her hand, the satisfaction of solving a mechanical problem no one else could crack. She'd been Nix, the phantom of the underground racing circuit, the driver whose name was whispered with equal parts fear and reverence. She'd owned custom-built machines that cost more than most people's houses. She'd walked away from races with enough cash to live comfortably for years. And then Dominic Rinaldi had walked into her father's garage. Adriana's father had owed money, significant money, the kind of debt that got people disappeared in the dead of night. Dominic had offered an alternative, marriage. A beautiful daughter in exchange for zeroed accounts and continued breathing. Her father had accepted before Adriana even knew about the offer. The wedding had been 3 months later. The erasure of her former self had been immediate and absolute. No more racing, no more late nights at the garage, no more freedom. Dominic had wanted a wife who enhanced his image, refined, cultured, silent. So Adriana had learned to be exactly that, burying Nick so deep she sometimes forgot that version of herself had ever existed. Almost. "Excuse me." Adriana's voice cut through the men's conversation with startling clarity. 5 sets of eyes turned toward her, surprised that the decoration had spoken. Dominic's expression tightened with displeasure. "Yes?" "I need air." She didn't wait for permission. She simply turned and walked, the champagne-colored gown swirling around her legs like water, her heels clicking against marble with decisive rhythm. She felt Dominic's stare burning into her back, felt the weight of broken protocol. Good wives didn't walk away in the middle of business discussions. Good wives certainly didn't excuse themselves without explicit approval. Adriana didn't care. She navigated through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting nods and murmured greetings without stopping. The ballroom felt suffocating. Too many predators in too small a space, all wearing masks of civility. She needed escape, needed space to breathe before the careful control she'd maintained for 3 years shattered completely. The mansion's grounds sprawled across 12 acres of manicured perfection. Adriana followed a stone path away from the noise and light, her heels sinking into grass as she abandoned the walkway entirely. She didn't stop until she reached the estate's garage, a massive structure that housed Marco Castellano's private collection. The side door was locked. Adriana pulled a hairpin from her chignon, ruining hours of professional styling, and had the mechanism defeated in under 30 seconds. Some skills you never forgot. Inside, the garage smelled like leather and expensive machinery. Motion sensor lights flickered on, revealing row after row of automotive excellence. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, vintage Corvettes, muscle cars restored to showroom perfection. It was a temple to speed and power. Adriana moved between the vehicles like a pilgrim approaching sacred ground. Her fingers traced the curve of a 1969 Dodge Charger's hood, feeling the cool metal beneath her palm. The car was flawless. Cherry red paint job, chrome accents polished to a mirror shine, an engine that would purr like a satisfied predator. The keys hung on a board near the entrance, organized by make and model. Trusting. Foolish. Adriana plucked the Charger's keys without hesitation. The weight of them in her palm felt like absolution, like permission to remember who she used to be. She slid into the driver's seat, and everything that had been locked away for 3 years came flooding back. The feel of leather beneath her hands, the promise of power waiting to be unleashed, the fundamental rightness of being exactly where she belonged. The engine roared to life with a sound that resonated in her chest like a war drum. For the first time in 3 years, Adriana smiled, and meant it. The industrial district sprawled along the waterfront like a rust-stained scar, miles removed from the gleaming towers of the financial district. Warehouses stood vacant, their windows shattered eyes staring at nothing. The docks that had once bustled with legitimate trade now hosted a different kind of commerce entirely. Adriana navigated the Charger through streets that GPS didn't recognize, following muscle memory and instinct. The underground racing circuit moved locations constantly, but certain principles remained consistent. You followed the sound. You looked for the telltale gathering of expensive vehicles in impossible-to-explain places. You listened for the specific quality of crowd noise that only came from people watching something illegal and thrilling. She found the location in an abandoned shipping yard where containers stacked 3 stories high created a makeshift arena. Portable lights cast harsh illumination across a quarter-mile stretch of cracked asphalt. At least 50 vehicles crowded the periphery, everything from souped-up imports to American muscle, each representing tens of thousands of dollars in modifications and dreams of glory. And in the center of it all, the crowd. Maybe 200 people, all connected by the same addiction, the need to watch something real and dangerous happen right in front of them. Adriana killed the Charger's engine and sat in sudden silence, her heart hammering. She'd walked away from this world, promised herself she'd never come back. It was too dangerous, too exposed. If Dominic found out, a lifeless decoration. The words echoed in her mind, sharp as broken glass. She grabbed the duffel bag from the passenger seat, a gym bag she'd found in the Charger's trunk, and emptied of its contents. Inside now, her heels, her jewelry, her carefully constructed mask. She'd changed in a gas station bathroom 20 minutes ago, trading the Valentino gown for clothes she'd bought at a 24-hour sporting goods store. Black jeans, a black tank top, steel-toed boots. Anonymous. Practical. Real. The final piece sat in her lap, a matte black helmet with a tinted visor. She'd found it in the Charger's trunk, likely belonging to Marco's son, who'd made a hobby of weekend track days. Adriana turned it over in her hands, seeing her reflection distorted in the dark visor. The woman looking back wasn't Adriana Rinaldi, wasn't the silent wife or the obedient daughter. She was Nick's, and Nick's had never asked permission for anything. Adriana tucked the helmet under her arm and stepped out of the Charger. The night air hit her face, carrying the familiar perfume of burnt rubber, gasoline, and possibility. Conversations died as she approached the crowd. Heads turned, eyes assessed. A cherry-red '69 Charger didn't go unnoticed in any context, but here, where machines were religion, it commanded respect. That's Castellano's car. A young guy in a backwards cap jabbed his friend's ribs. I've seen it at shows. What the hell is it doing here? Who's driving it? No idea. Never seen her before. Adriana kept walking, ignoring the whispers. The crowd parted for her, not out of recognition, but because of the way she moved, confident, purposeful, someone who knew exactly where they belonged and didn't need validation. The race organizer stood near a makeshift starting line, clipboard in hand, counting a brick of cash with the focused attention of a priest performing a ritual. He looked up as Adriana approached, his expression shifting from annoyance to interest to calculation in rapid succession. Entry fees $10,000. His eyes flicked to the Charger. Cash only. And before you ask, yes, I know whose car that is. Question is, does he know you're here with it? I need a slot in the next race. Adriana's voice came out steady, stripped of the refined softness she'd cultivated for 3 years. This was her real voice, the one that had negotiated with mechanics and called out drivers who tried to cheat. You need a slot. The organizer laughed, sharp and dismissive. You and everyone else, sweetheart. I got a waiting list longer than... Adriana pulled a stack of hundreds from her pocket and counted out $10,000 with practiced efficiency. Money she'd skimmed over 3 years from household accounts Dominic never bothered to review. Money she'd saved without knowing why, some part of her apparently unwilling to completely surrender. The organizer's laughter died. He took the cash, counted it twice, then fixed Adriana with a measuring stare. You know what you're doing? Yes. This isn't some track day where you get a do-over if you spin out. You wreck that pretty machine. Nobody's calling you a tow truck. You understand? I understand. He studied her for a long moment, then shrugged. Your funeral. You're in the next heat. 4 drivers. Winner take all. He gestured toward the starting line. Racers are staging now. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly. Adriana walked toward the designated staging area, aware of the crowd's attention shifting, focusing. Whispers rippled outward like concentric circles on water. Who is she? Never seen her before. She's gonna get eaten alive. 3 other vehicles idled at the starting line. a metallic blue Nissan GTR with enough aftermarket parts to fund a small business, a black Dodge Challenger that rumbled with barely contained violence, and a silver BMW M4 that looked like it had been engineered by scientists and blessed by speed demons. The drivers were exactly what she expected. Young, mostly male, radiating the particular arrogance of people who'd won enough races to believe they were invincible. They sized up the Charger with practiced eyes, noting the classic lines, the stock appearance, the apparent lack of serious modifications. The GTR's driver, a Latino kid who couldn't have been more than 22, grinned at his companions. "Look at this. Somebody's daddy let them borrow the classic for the night. Probably thinks this is a car show." The Challenger's driver leaned out his window. "Hey, princess, you lost? The cruise-in is 2 towns over." Adriana slid into the Charger and closed the door, cutting off their laughter. She pulled on the helmet, adjusted the seat, checked the mirrors. Muscle memory took over. Her hands knew exactly where to go. Her body knew exactly how to prepare. She placed one hand on the gear shift, the other on the wheel, and let herself feel the car beneath her. The Charger wasn't stock, not even close. Marco Castellano might have appreciated vintage aesthetics, but under the hood was pure modern engineering. She could feel it in the way the engine thrummed, the way the whole machine seemed to strain against stillness. The race organizer stepped into the space between the vehicles, raising one arm. "Quarter mile. First one across the far line wins. Hit a container, you're out. Hit another racer, you're out and banned. Hit a spectator." He smiled without humor. "Well, let's not find out what happens then." Adriana's pulse steadied. The noise of the crowd faded to white noise. The world narrowed to the strip of asphalt ahead, the weight of the accelerator beneath her foot, the exact moment when the organizer's arm would drop. "On my mark!" The organizer's voice cut through the engine noise. 3! The GTR revved, its turbos spooling. 2! The Challenger's driver was already inching forward, trying to steal advantage. 1! Adriana's breathing slowed. Her vision sharpened. The arm dropped. "Go!" Adriana's foot crushed the accelerator. The Charger exploded forward, its rear tires breaking traction in a controlled burn before catching and launching the vehicle like a missile. G-force slammed her back into the seat. The engine's roar drowned out everything except the pure, crystalline focus that came from riding the razor's edge between control and chaos. The GTR jumped to an early lead, its turbos providing brutal acceleration. The BMW slotted in second, its sophisticated traction control keeping it stable. The Challenger matched Adriana's pace, neck and neck through the first 100 feet. But then the real race began. Adriana shifted with mechanical precision, each gear change executed at the exact optimal moment. She'd memorized this engine's power band in the 15-minute drive to the docks, felt its preferences, understood its personality. The Charger wasn't the most technologically advanced vehicle in the race, but it had something the others lacked: raw, uncompromising power married to classic American engineering. And it had Adriana. The GTR's driver made his first mistake at the 100-yard mark, shifting too early and losing momentum. The BMW capitalized immediately, cutting inside and claiming the lead. The Challenger stayed aggressive, pushing Adriana toward the container stacks on the right side of the course. Amateur intimidation tactics. Adriana didn't flinch, she held her line, letting the Challenger's driver think he'd succeeded in rattling her. Then, at precisely the right moment, she dropped back half a car length and cut hard left. The Charger responded like an extension of her will, its rear end sliding in a perfectly controlled drift that carried her past the Challenger before he could react. The crowd's roar penetrated her focus for just a second, recognition that they'd witnessed something exceptional. 3 cars remained ahead of her, quarter mile to go. The BMW held first place, the GTR had recovered to second, and Adriana sat in third with the Challenger falling back after his failed intimidation play. The halfway point flashed past. Adriana pushed the Charger harder, its speedometer climbing past 90, past 100, into territory where mistakes became fatal and hesitation meant defeat. The GTR's driver tried to block as Adriana approached, weaving slightly to cover both passing lanes. Professional move, effective against most challengers. Adriana wasn't most challengers. She waited for the GTR to commit to a defensive line, then threaded the needle, a gap barely wider than her vehicle, requiring absolute confidence in her spatial awareness. The Charger's passenger side missed the GTR's bumper by inches. The driver's side came within a hand width of a container wall. Adriana never wavered. Second place. One car ahead. 200 yards remaining. The BMW's driver was good. She could see it in the way he took the racing line, maximizing every inch of available space. He knew she was coming, kept checking his mirrors, preparing his defense. But he'd made the fundamental mistake of believing this was about the cars. It wasn't. It had never been. This was about the driver. And nobody wanted this more than Adriana did. She'd spent 3 years in a cage, 3 years being invisible, 3 years being dismissed as decoration. Every ounce of suppressed rage, every moment of swallowed dignity, every time she'd smiled when she wanted to scream, it all poured into this moment. The BMW driver moved to block. Adriana was already where he didn't expect, coming up on his blind side with timing that bordered on precognition. She'd read his body language through his window, seeing the subtle tension that preceded his defensive move, adjusted before he'd even begun. Nix had always been about reading the race 3 moves ahead. They entered the final straight side by side, inches apart, traveling at speeds that would turn any mistake into tragedy. The finish line waited 100 yards ahead. 50. 25. Adriana shifted one final time, extracting every atom of performance from the Charger's engine. The BMW matched her, the 2 cars perfectly aligned. 10 yards. 5. The Charger's nose crossed the line less than a second before the BMW's. Victory. Adriana eased off the accelerator, letting the Charger coast to a stop far beyond the finish. Her hands trembled slightly on the wheel, adrenaline burning through her system, 3 years of suppressed need finally finding release. She'd won. More than that, she'd remembered what it felt like to be fully, completely alive. The crowd's roar reached new heights, a wall of sound that vibrated through the Charger's frame. Adriana sat in the sudden quiet of the idling engine, letting herself feel everything. The satisfaction, the vindication, the pure rightness of being exactly who she was meant to be. Then she noticed the silence spreading through the crowd like ice across water, conversations dying, heads turning, the particular quality of stillness that came from predators recognizing a bigger predator in their territory. Adriana's triumph crystallized into something colder. She looked toward the crowd's periphery and saw exactly what she'd feared. A black SUV with tinted windows, flanked by 2 matching vehicles. Dominic's signature convoy. And standing in front of it, illuminated by harsh portable lights, Dominic Rinaldi himself. His expression was unreadable from this distance, but his posture spoke volumes, absolutely still, completely focused. The same stance he adopted before making decisions that ended lives. Their eyes met across 100 yards of cracked asphalt and stunned silence. For the first time in their 3-year marriage, Dominic actually saw her. Adriana killed the Charger's engine. The silence that followed felt apocalyptic. 200 people held their collective breath, understanding they were witnessing something unprecedented. The Mafia boss's quiet wife, the underground racing circuit's newest champion. The same person. Impossible. Adriana removed her helmet with deliberate slowness, letting her dark hair fall free. She opened the driver's door and stepped out, still wearing the anonymous black clothes, still standing in the aftermath of a victory Dominic would never have believed possible. She'd hidden for 3 years, survived by being invisible, endured by convincing herself that silence was strength. But Dominic had called her a lifeless decoration. And lifeless decorations didn't drive like forces of nature. Didn't dominate races against competitors half their age, didn't stand in abandoned shipyards with $10,000 in prize money and the respect of people who valued skill over pedigree. Adriana started walking toward her husband, not hurrying, not hesitating, just moving with the confident, unhurried pace of someone who'd finally stopped apologizing for existing. Dominic's security detail moved to intercept. 6 men in tactical gear, hands near weapons, ready to protect their boss from whatever threat this represented. "Let her through." Dominic's voice cut through the tension. His eyes never left Adriana's face. The security detail parted. Adriana walked through them like they were statues, her focus entirely on the man who'd dismissed her as decoration. They stood 10 feet apart, close enough to read expressions, far enough to feel the chasm between them. You stole Marco Castellano's car. Dominic's voice was carefully controlled. Crashed his gala. Disappeared for 3 hours. And I find you... He gestured at the scene. Here. Racing. Winning. Yes. Adriana's voice came out steady. No apology, no explanation, just acknowledgement. How long? The question emerged sharp as a blade. How long have you been able to drive like that? Since before you knew my name. Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. Confusion, recognition. The beginning of understanding that the woman he'd married was someone entirely different from who he'd believed. 3 years, his jaw tightened. 3 years you stood beside me, silent and still, and you never thought to mention you could do this? He gestured at the charger, at the race course, at the evidence of skills that existed in direct contradiction to everything he thought he knew. You never asked. Adriana held his stare. You told me what kind of wife you wanted. Refined, cultured, silent. I became exactly that. But that doesn't mean it was ever who I actually am. The crowd watched in rapt silence, understanding they were witnessing something far more dangerous than illegal street racing. This was a marriage imploding in real time, power dynamics shifting like tectonic plates. Who are you? Dominic's voice dropped to something quieter, more dangerous. Not the public boss voice, something more personal. Because the woman I married wouldn't have done this. Could have done this. The woman you married was a ghost. Adriana took a step forward, closing the distance. A construction. Someone I built to survive a marriage I never wanted. But she was never real, Dominic. She was what you needed me to be, nothing more. And this? He gestured at the racing setup. This is real? This is Nick's. The name emerged naturally, without hesitation. Underground racing champion, 3 years retired, undefeated record. The woman your wife used to be before you erased her. Dominic stared at her like she'd grown additional heads. Nick's. He said the name slowly, testing it. Then something clicked. Nick's. The ghost racer. The phantom driver everyone talked about 5 years ago. The one who disappeared without explanation. His eyes widened fractionally. That was you? That was me. Why didn't you? He stopped, recalibrating. Why hide it? You wanted a decorative wife. Would you have married a woman known for dominating illegal racing circuits? Would that have enhanced your image at charity galas? Dominic had no answer. They both knew the truth. The woman he'd wanted, the quiet, refined, utterly presentable wife, was incompatible with the woman who'd just destroyed 3 opponents without breaking a sweat. I listened to you tonight. Adriana's voice remained steady, but something sharp entered it. At the gala, you and your colleagues discussing me like I wasn't standing 3 feet away. You called me a lifeless decoration, perfect because I don't have opinions, beautiful and empty. Dominic's expression shifted, the first hint of discomfort. 3 years I've been exactly what you wanted. 3 years I suffocated everything real to fit into your life, and that's how you see me. As nothing. She took another step forward, close enough now that she could see the complex play of emotions across his face. So I stopped pretending, because I'd rather be dangerous and real than perfect and invisible. Silence stretched between them, heavy with 3 years of unspoken truths finally finding air. Dominic's phone buzzed. He ignored it, buzzed again. He pulled it out with visible irritation, glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor changed. The personal conflict vanished, replaced by the cold calculation of a man receiving information that changed equations. We need to leave. His voice shifted to command mode. Now. I'm not finished. Someone planted a bomb in my vehicle. Dominic's eyes locked on hers, completely serious. Security just found it. 2 pounds of C4 wired to the ignition. If I'd driven myself tonight instead of taking the armored convoy, I'd be scattered across 5 city blocks. The words landed like physical impact. Adriana's mind immediately started calculating implications. An inside job. Had to be. Dominic's vehicles were kept in a secured garage with camera coverage and armed guards, someone with access, someone trusted. Your security chief. The realization crystallized instantly. He's the only one with override access to the garage, the only person who could disable cameras without raising flags. Dominic stared at her. How did you? Because I've been invisible for 3 years, and invisible people notice everything. Adriana's voice came out hard, certain. Vincent Moretti asked too many specific questions tonight about your schedule, your vehicles, your security protocols. Your chief was at the gala. He left early, said it was a family emergency. That wasn't coincidence. Vincent Moretti. Dominic's expression went very still, very dangerous. The look that preceded violence. He's making a move. And your security chief is either compromised or a willing participant. Adriana glanced at the convoy. Which means everyone with you tonight is potentially suspect. You can't trust your own protection detail. The assessment was brutal, accurate, and completely at odds with the quiet, decorative wife who wasn't supposed to have tactical opinions. Dominic looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since they'd met. Seeing not what he wanted to see, but what was actually there. A woman who'd read the political landscape in a single evening of observation, who'd assessed threats while standing silent in expensive gowns, who'd survived by being underestimated while remaining lethally aware. Can you get us out of here? His voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. Not a command, a request. Maybe even a plea. Adriana turned toward the Charger. Get in. Dominic moved toward the Charger with the controlled urgency of a man who'd survived too many attempts on his life to panic, but who understood when the situation had crossed from theoretical danger into immediate crisis. His security detail started to follow, hands moving toward weapons in practiced readiness. Stay with the convoy. Dominic's command stopped them mid-stride. Follow at a distance. Do not engage unless I signal. And get me a secure line to Marcus at the safe house. The head of his detail, a broad-shouldered man named Torres, hesitated. Sir, we can't protect you if you're in a separate vehicle with my wife? Dominic's voice carried an edge sharp enough to draw blood. The woman who just identified a conspiracy I missed? That's exactly where I need to be. Torres's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Years of service had taught him when to argue and when to obey. This was the latter. Adriana was already in the driver's seat, engine running, her earlier adrenaline rush transformed into something colder and more focused. Combat readiness. She'd never been in a firefight, but 3 years of observing Dominic's world had taught her the fundamentals. Stay mobile, trust no one, assume every shadow held a threat. Dominic slid into the passenger seat and barely had time to close the door before Adriana punched the accelerator. The Charger surged forward, leaving the stunned crowd and Dominic's security convoy in a spray of gravel and burnt rubber. Seatbelt. Adriana's voice came out clipped, professional. The same tone she'd heard Dominic use during crisis situations. He complied without argument, his phone already pressed to his ear. Marcus, talk to me. Adriana couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she watched Dominic's expression shift through micro-expressions that told their own story. Confusion, anger, deadly certainty. How long ago? Dominic's knuckles whitened around the phone. And you're sure it was clean? A pause. No, I'm mobile. With Adriana. Yes, that Adriana. His eyes flicked toward her. I'll explain later. Right now I need you to pull security footage from the estate garage. Last 72 hours. Focus on anyone accessing my vehicles. And Marcus, start with footage of Richard. Richard Castellano. The security chief Adriana had identified. Dominic was already moving on her assessment without hesitation. Where are we going? Dominic ended the call and turned his full attention to her. They were doing 70 on surface streets, weaving through late-night traffic with the kind of precision that spoke to absolute confidence behind the wheel. Somewhere without surveillance, somewhere your people don't know about, somewhere we can think. Adriana took a corner hard enough to make the tires scream, her body moving in perfect synchronization with the vehicle's dynamics. You have a safe house Vincent Moretti doesn't know about? 3 of them. He knows about all 3. Dominic's expression darkened. How could you possibly? Because at the gala, before you called me decoration, I spent 20 minutes standing silent while Vincent asked your underboss Carlo about contingency protocols. Carlo got drunk and nostalgic, started talking about the good old days. Mentioned how smart you were to maintain safe houses in the financial district, the port area, and out in Bridgewater. Adriana merged onto the highway, accelerating smoothly past 80. Vincent acted like it was news. It wasn't. He already knew. He was confirming details. The silence that followed was profound. Dominic stared at her like she'd revealed the ability to read minds. You remember that? A conversation you weren't even part of? From hours ago? I remember everything. Adriana kept her eyes on the road, tracking headlights in her mirrors, watching for tails. When you're invisible, listening is all you can do, so you get good at it. Dominic's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. Marcus found something. Let me guess. Richard accessed your vehicle bay 3 times in the last 48 hours, each time for exactly 7 minutes, long enough to plant a device and wire it properly. How did you... Dominic stopped himself. Of course you know timing protocols. You've been watching us for 3 years. Learning, Adriana corrected. There's a difference. Watching is passive. Learning means understanding the patterns well enough to predict them. She changed lanes, cutting off a sedan whose driver honked in impotent rage. Richard's been with you for what, 8 years? 9. Family? Sister in Chicago. Nephew with medical issues, expensive medical issues. There's your pressure point. Adriana took the next exit, leaving the highway for a maze of industrial streets that hadn't seen legitimate business in a decade. Vincent finds someone with leverage, applies pressure, and suddenly your most trusted security chief becomes a liability. Classic infiltration. They drove in silence for several minutes, the city falling away behind them, replaced by warehouses and abandoned factories. Adriana navigated without GPS, relying on memory and instinct. She'd explored these areas years ago, back when she'd needed places to work on cars without interference. The industrial wasteland had provided perfect anonymity then. It would serve the same purpose now. Where did you learn tactical assessment? Dominic's voice carried genuine curiosity beneath the tension. Racing doesn't teach you how to identify security vulnerabilities. My father's garage wasn't just about cars. Adriana slowed, scanning buildings for the one she remembered. Before he got in debt to you, he ran a chop shop, took apart stolen vehicles, sold the parts, moved the proceeds through shell companies. I learned how to strip a car down to components before I learned algebra. And when you're in that world, you learn to think like the people who want to catch you. Your father ran a chop shop. Dominic processed this new information. The man I thought was a legitimate mechanic. He was legitimate. Until he wasn't. Money problems make people flexible about legality. She pulled the Charger into an alleyway between 2 massive warehouses, killing the lights. He taught me engines. The criminal element taught me everything else. Adriana parked behind a rusted dumpster that concealed the vehicle from casual observation. She killed the engine, and sudden silence pressed in around them. No traffic noise, no sirens, just the tick of cooling metal and the distant sound of water lapping against industrial piers. This is where you bring me? Dominic surveyed their surroundings with obvious skepticism. A abandoned warehouse district? This is where I bring us to stay alive. Adriana opened her door. Your safe houses have security systems. Security systems have access logs. Access logs can be monitored by people you trust who shouldn't be trusted. Here? She gestured at the urban decay surrounding them. No systems, no logs, no way for anyone to track us unless they physically follow, and I've been checking mirrors for the last 30 minutes. We're clear. She led him to a service entrance she'd used years ago. The padlock was rusted, but the mechanism still worked. Inside, the warehouse smelled like abandonment and old concrete. Adriana pulled a small flashlight from the Charger's glove compartment. She'd grabbed it before leaving the racing site, some instinct telling her they'd need resources. The beam of light revealed a vast, empty space. Shipping containers stacked in the corners, their paint faded to industrial ghosts. An office area elevated along one wall, its windows dark and watching, enough shadows to hide an army. We're exposed here. Dominic's hand moved to his waistband, where Adriana knew he kept a compact 9mm. No exit secured, no sightlines controlled. We're invisible, Adriana countered. There's a difference. Exposure means people know where you are and can target you. Invisibility means nobody thinks to look. She moved toward the elevated office. Come on, The office had been ransacked years ago, filing cabinets overturned, furniture broken, anything valuable long since stripped. But the structure was sound, and the windows provided views of all approach angles. Adriana positioned herself where she could watch the entrance they'd used and the loading bay doors on the opposite wall. Dominic joined her, his phone casting pale light across his features. Marcus confirmed the explosives, military-grade C4, remote detonator, backup timer, sophisticated setup. Whoever planted it knew exactly what they were doing. Richard has military background? Marines. Explosives, ordnance, disposal. Dominic's voice carried bitter recognition. He'd know how to build a bomb that wouldn't fail. But he did fail. Adriana turned from the window. He failed because you didn't drive yourself tonight. Why the convoy? You usually drive yourself to events. Dominic's expression shifted, the look of a man recognizing how close he'd come to death. Last-minute decision. Torres insisted, said there'd been chatter about increased security risks. I thought he was being paranoid. Torres saved your life. Or Torres is part of the conspiracy and the plan changed. Dominic's paranoia wasn't unfounded. When bombs started appearing in your vehicles, trust became a luxury you couldn't afford. No, Adriana shook her head. If Torres wanted you dead, he had a dozen easier opportunities tonight. Private moments. Moments when your guard was down. Bombs are distance weapons. You use them when you can't get close or when you want to send a message. What message does a car bomb send? That you're vulnerable. That your security isn't absolute. That the empire has cracks. Adriana moved closer, her voice dropping. Vincent isn't just trying to kill you. He's trying to destabilize your entire organization. Make your people question whether you can protect them. Make your allies wonder if backing you is worth the risk. Dominic studied her in the darkness, the glow from his phone highlighting the sharp lines of her face. You've thought about this before, about how someone would take down my organization. I've thought about a lot of things while standing silent at galas. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Your skills, your observations, your assessments? Because you wanted a decorative wife, not a strategic partner. And because Adriana paused, weighing how much truth to reveal. Because I convinced myself that staying invisible was safer than being seen, that if I never gave you a reason to notice me, I could survive this marriage without losing whatever was left of myself. And tonight? Tonight you called me lifeless, and I realized I'd already lost myself trying to be what you wanted. So I took it back. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to address. Dominic's phone buzzed again, shattering the moment. Marcus, Dominic put the call on speaker. What do you have? Footage confirmation, Richard accessed the vehicle bay 3 times. But boss, there's more. We pulled his financial records, wire transfers, $200,000 deposited in his sister's medical fund over the last 6 months. Payments came from a shell corporation registered in Delaware. Trace the corporation. Already did. It's buried under 6 layers of holding companies, but the ultimate owner is a real estate investment firm that Vincent Moretti uses for money laundering. Dominic's jaw clenched so hard Adriana could hear his teeth grinding. Vincent bought my security chief. For 6 months, he's had access to everything. My schedules, my safe houses, my security protocols. There's more, boss. Richard's not here. His apartment is cleared out. Looks like he left in a hurry, maybe 2 hours ago. We found his service weapon and badge in the trash. He's running. Or he's already dead. Adriana's voice cut through the tension. Vincent doesn't leave loose ends. Richard served his purpose. Now he's a liability who knows too much. Dominic ended the call without responding to Marcus. He stood there in the darkness, a man watching his carefully constructed empire reveal structural cracks. How many others? His voice came out rough. If Vincent compromised Richard, who else has he bought? How deep does this go? Deep enough that he felt confident planting a bomb in your personal vehicle. Deep enough that he knew your schedule well enough to know when you'd be using it. Deep enough that he's probably planned for this conversation happening right now. Dominic turned to face her fully. What would you do? If you were running this operation? If you were Vincent trying to take down my organization? Adriana considered the question seriously. It wasn't rhetorical. Dominic was actually asking for her strategic assessment, treating her like an equal for the first time in their marriage. I'd use the bomb as a distraction, get you focused on finding the traitor, securing your vehicles, checking your inner circle. While you're looking inward, I'd hit you from the outside. Target your revenue streams, your alliances. Make it look like you're losing control on multiple fronts simultaneously. What revenue streams? The Port Authority contracts you're negotiating, the casino development in Atlantic City, the construction union agreements. Adriana had absorbed 3 years of business discussions, filing away details that seemed irrelevant at the time. Vincent was very interested in those projects at the gala, asked specific questions about timelines and partnerships. Dominic's expression shifted to something between respect and disbelief. You remember business discussions from hours ago? Casual conversations about contracts and timelines? I remember everything, Adriana repeated. It's what invisible people do. We listen, we remember, we understand. Because information is the only power we have. Dominic's phone rang again. This time he didn't put it on speaker. He listened for 30 seconds, his expression darkening with each passing moment. Understood. Lock it down. Nobody in or out without my personal authorization. He ended the call and met Adriana's eyes. The Port Authority just got an anonymous tip about my organization's involvement in smuggling operations. They're launching an investigation. The Casino Development Board received documentation suggesting my financing comes from illegal sources. And the construction union's leadership was just informed that working with me violates federal racketeering laws. All happening right now? Tonight? Within the last hour. Vincent's timeline. Adriana's mind raced through implications. He planted the bomb knowing you'd survive, knowing you'd find Richard's betrayal, knowing you'd go into lockdown mode. And while you're defending yourself from phantom attacks on your business operations, he's positioning himself as the stable alternative, the boss who has control while you're scrambling. It's a coup. Dominic's voice carried the weight of recognition. Not a hit, a complete organizational takeover. Can you stop it? Not from here. Not without access to my people, my resources, my network. He looked at her. I need to get back. Need to shore up defenses, manage the crises, prove to everyone that I'm still in control. That's exactly what Vincent wants you to do. He wants you visible, predictable, moving according to patterns he's already planned for. The moment you surface, you're vulnerable. So what's the alternative? Hide in an abandoned warehouse while my empire burns? The alternative is you send a message that can't be ignored. That shows everyone you're not just surviving, you're hunting. Adriana moved to the window, looking out at the industrial wasteland. Vincent thinks he knows you, thinks he's predicted your response. Show him he's wrong. How? Adriana turned back to face him, and in the darkness, Dominic saw something he'd never noticed before. His quiet, decorative wife had the eyes of a predator, someone who understood violence not as theory, but as tangible reality. Richard ran because he knows Vincent will kill him to eliminate evidence, which means Richard is desperate, scared, and willing to deal. Find him before Vincent does. Get him to flip. Then you have proof of the conspiracy, leverage against Vincent, and a way to control the narrative. Marcus already looked. Richard's in the wind. Marcus looked in obvious places. Safe houses, family connections, known associates. But Richard's military, right? Marines have their own networks, their own safe harbors. Dominic's eyes narrowed. How do you know about military networks? Because my father's chop shop serviced vehicles for a veterans motorcycle club. They had places they'd go when civilian law got too close, off-grid locations that only club members knew about. Richard's scared and running. He'll go somewhere familiar, somewhere that reminds him of when life made sense. There's a Marine Corps bar on the south side, dive place where veterans drink and pretend the civilian world doesn't exist. Richard used to talk about it. That's where he'll be, somewhere he can blend in with people who understand his language, somewhere he feels safe. Dominic pulled out his phone, then stopped. If I call Torres to check it out, and Torres is compromised, Richard dies before we get answers. If I call anyone in my organization right now, I risk tipping off Vincent. So we don't call anyone. Adriana held his stare. We go ourselves. We? You're not trained for confrontation. Richard's a combat veteran. If he's cornered, he'll respond with violence. Then it's good I'm not planning to corner him. Adriana moved toward the door. I'm planning to offer him something Vincent can't. A way out that doesn't end with a bullet in his head. They descended the office stairs in silence. The Charger waited in the alley like a sleeping predator, its cherry red paint absorbing and reflecting ambient light in equal measure. Dominic stopped her before she could open the driver's door. Why are you doing this? 3 years you've been invisible. 3 years you could have walked away, divorced me, rebuilt your life somewhere else. Why now? Why help me? Adriana considered the question. The honest answer was complicated, layered with motivations she didn't fully understand herself. Anger at being dismissed, satisfaction at finally being seen, the strange intimacy of shared danger, and something deeper, more primal. The recognition that for the first time in 3 years she wasn't being asked to be less than she was. She was being asked to be exactly as capable as she'd always been. Because you called me lifeless, she said finally, and I wanted to show you exactly how alive I actually am. The rest? She opened the car door. We'll figure out as we go. The Marine Corps bar occupied the ground floor of a building that had been condemned twice and refused to die. No sign outside, just a red door and a small window that leaked golden light and the sound of voices who'd seen too much and couldn't forget. Adriana parked the Charger 3 blocks away, positioning for quick escape. They approached on foot, Dominic's hand resting casually on his concealed weapon, Adriana moving with the same confidence she'd shown on the racecourse. Let me talk to him first. Adriana's voice was quiet. You walk in there and he'll panic, think it's a hit. But me? I'm just the boss's quiet wife, non-threatening, forgettable. Except you're not. Dominic's voice carried something that might have been admiration. Forgettable, I mean. Richard doesn't know that yet. They entered the bar through the red door, and conversation stuttered like an engine missing spark. A dozen faces turned toward them, weathered men nursing drinks and memories, reading the newcomers with the automatic threat assessment of people who'd survived combat. Richard Castellano sat in the back corner, his back to the wall, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the table in front of him. His eyes tracked Adriana and Dominic with the hollow awareness of a man who'd been expecting this moment. Adriana moved first, walking directly to his table with her hands visible and her posture open. Non-aggressive, just a woman approaching a man for conversation. You're waiting for Vincent to send someone. Her voice carried clearly in the sudden quiet. Someone to make sure you can't testify. Can't expose the conspiracy. Can't trade information for protection. Richard's hand disappeared beneath the table, reaching for a weapon. You're here to do it yourself. Dominic's way of sending a message. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Dominic's voice cut through the tension. He'd positioned himself near the entrance, controlling the exit, his weapon still holstered. I'm here to offer you something Vincent won't. A choice. Choice? Richard laughed bitterly. There's no choice. I'm dead the moment I leave this building. Vincent, you doesn't matter. I'm a loose end. Your leverage. Adriana sat down across from Richard without asking permission. You're proof of Vincent's conspiracy, testimony that can bring down his entire operation. And you're alive right now because I convinced Dominic that you're worth more talking than silent. Richard's eyes flicked between them, calculating odds. Why would Dominic let me live? I planted a bomb in his car. I betrayed 9 years of service. I deserve execution. You deserve a lot of things. Dominic moved closer, his presence filling the space. But what I need right now is information, names, accounts, communication records, everything Vincent told you, everything you did for him. Complete cooperation in exchange for your sister keeping her medical funding and you keeping your life. My sister's money came from Vincent, and it'll keep coming, from me, double what Vincent paid, but only if you give me everything. Richard stared at Dominic, searching for the trap. You'd pay for my sister's medical care after I tried to kill you? He'd do it because you're not the villain here. Adriana's voice softened slightly. Vincent is. He found your pressure point and exploited it, made you choose between betraying your boss and watching your nephew die. That's not evil. That's desperation. And desperate men can be reasoned with. The truth of it settled over Richard like a weight. His hand emerged from beneath the table, empty. His shoulders sagged with the exhaustion of carrying impossible choices. Vincent has 5 other people in Dominic's organization. I don't know all the names, but I know there's someone in the accounting department, someone in operations, someone close to the underboss Carlo. Richard's voice came out hollow. He's been building this for 2 years, planting people, creating dependencies, waiting for the right moment to execute. The bomb was the trigger. Dominic's voice was cold. Proof that I'm vulnerable. Signal for everyone to make their moves. He wanted you scared, wanted you making mistakes. The business investigations, the federal attention, it's all coordinated. Vincent has people in the Port Authority, the casino board, even the FBI field office. He's been building a case against you while simultaneously positioning himself as the legitimate alternative. Adriana and Dominic exchanged glances. The conspiracy was deeper and more sophisticated than either had imagined. "Give me names," Dominic commanded. "Everyone Vincent compromised. Every piece of the operation you know about." Richard talked for 20 minutes. Names, dates, account numbers, meeting locations. He laid out Vincent's entire conspiracy with the mechanical precision of a man who'd memorized details as insurance. By the time he finished, Dominic had enough information to dismantle Vincent's operation and expose the rot that had spread through his organization. "There's one more thing." Richard's voice dropped to barely audible. "Vincent's planning something for tomorrow night. The big summit meeting at the Regency Hotel, all 5 families gathering to discuss the territory agreements. He's going to make his move there. Public accusation. Documentation of your alleged crimes. A vote of no confidence that strips your position and transfers power to him. A public coup at a family summit." Dominic's expression was stone. "He's not just taking my territory, he's taking my seat at the table. He's been planning it for months, has votes lined up, has evidence fabricated. By the time the meeting ends tomorrow night, you'll be out and he'll be in." Adriana stood, her mind already racing through countermeasures. "Then we have less than 24 hours to dismantle 2 years of conspiracy and expose Vincent before he can execute his endgame." "We?" Richard looked at her with genuine confusion. "Who exactly are you?" Adriana smiled, the first real smile she'd managed since leaving the gala. "I'm the lifeless decoration, the quiet wife, the woman everyone ignored while she learned exactly how to bring down empires." She turned to Dominic. "Get Richard to safety, somewhere Vincent can't reach, then start making calls. We have work to do." The safe house Dominic chose for Richard wasn't one of the 3 Vincent knew about. It was a 4th location, an apartment above a Portuguese bakery in a neighborhood where nobody asked questions and everyone minded their own business. Marcus met them there at 3 in the morning, his expression carefully neutral when he saw Adriana still at Dominic's side, still wearing the black racing clothes, still moving with the decisive confidence of someone who'd stopped pretending to be harmless. "Boss." Marcus handed Dominic a secure phone and a manila envelope thick with documents. "Everything Richard gave us checks out. The accounting department mole is Sandra Reeves. Operations is compromised by Vincent's nephew, Tommy Moretti. And the person close to Carlo?" He paused, visibly uncomfortable. "It's Carlo's driver, guy named Jimmy Pescatore. He's been feeding Vincent information for 18 months. Dominic's jaw tightened. Carlo was his underboss, his second in command, the man he trusted with operational authority. Having Carlo's driver compromised meant Vincent had access to nearly everything. "How deep does Jimmy's access go?" Adriana asked the question before Dominic could. She'd positioned herself near the window, watching the street below with the same vigilance she'd shown at the warehouse. Marcus turned to her and for the first time really looked at her. Not as the boss's wife, as someone who'd earned the right to ask tactical questions. "Deep enough. Jimmy drives Carlo everywhere, hears every phone call, knows every meeting location. If Carlo discussed it in his car, Vincent knows about it. Which means Vincent knows about the emergency response protocols." Adriana's mind raced through implications. He knows how Dominic's organization reacts to crises, knows the fallback positions, the communication hierarchies, the decision-making patterns. He's been studying us. Dominic's voice carried cold fury. For 2 years, he's been watching how we move, learning our rhythms, identifying our weaknesses. Tonight wasn't improvised, it was choreographed. So we changed the choreography. Adriana turned from the window. "Vincent's planned for you to react predictably. Shore up defenses, call emergency meetings, go into protection mode. Don't give him what he expects. What do you suggest? Attack, not defensively, not reactively, aggressively. She moved to the table where Marcus had spread documents, financial records, communication logs, surveillance photos. Vincent's built his conspiracy on the assumption that you won't see it coming until it's too late. He's counting on surprise and momentum. Take both away from him. Marcus glanced at Dominic, clearly uncertain whether to take strategic direction from the boss's wife. Dominic nodded slightly, granting permission. How do we take away his momentum? Marcus asked. The summit's tomorrow night. That's his endgame. His moment to present fabricated evidence and force a vote. Even if we expose his moles, he'll just accelerate the timeline. Then we don't wait for the summit. Adriana's fingers traced connections between documents, linking names and transactions with the pattern recognition she'd honed through years of invisible observation. We expose him before he can make his move. Publicly. Undeniably. In a way that destroys his credibility before he can destroy yours. How? Dominic leaned forward, his full attention on her now. Not humoring her. Actually listening. Richard gave us account numbers, wire transfers, communication records. That's evidence of conspiracy, but it's technical, boring. The kind of thing that gets buried in legal proceedings while Vincent controls the narrative. Adriana pulled out her phone, the same phone she'd used to navigate to the racing circuit, now serving a different purpose. We need something visceral, something the other families can't ignore or dismiss. She pulled up a news article from 6 months ago. Local businessman found dead in his car. Apparent suicide. Case closed. Thomas Rivera. Adriana showed them the article. He owned a construction company that was bidding against Vincent for the union contracts. Died 3 days after submitting his final proposal. Ruled a suicide, but the timing was suspicious enough that people whispered. I remember. Dominic's voice was quiet. Vincent got the contracts, consolidated his construction empire. I thought it was fortunate timing. It was murder. Adriana pulled up another article. And he's not the only one. 4 other competitors have died or disappeared in the last 2 years. All of them obstacles to Vincent's expansion. All of them ruled accidents or suicides or simply unsolved. Marcus stared at the phone screen. You think Vincent had them killed? I think Vincent's been eliminating competition while building his conspiracy against Dominic. 2 parallel operations, one focused on infiltration, one focused on consolidation. And I think if we dig into these deaths, we'll find connections that prove he's not just a conspirator. He's a serial killer hiding behind legitimate business. That's a serious accusation, Dominic's voice carried warning. Accusing another family boss of murder without absolute proof is grounds for retaliation. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. Adriana met his eyes. I've spent 3 years watching these people, listening to conversations, reading body language. Vincent Moretti is ambitious, ruthless, and patient. He doesn't just want your territory. He wants to be untouchable. And the best way to be untouchable is to eliminate anyone who might challenge you before they become a threat. The silence that followed was heavy with calculation. Dominic exchanged glances with Marcus, some wordless communication passing between them. If we investigate these deaths and find proof, Marcus said slowly, we have leverage. Real leverage. Not just evidence of conspiracy against Dominic, but evidence of unsanctioned murders. The other families won't tolerate that. It threatens everyone. Exactly. Adriana turned back to the documents. Vincent's been so focused on his long game that he's left a trail. We just need to follow it. In less than 24 hours? Marcus shook his head. Boss, even if she's right, we don't have time to conduct proper investigations. The summit's tomorrow night. We don't need proper investigations. Adriana pulled up contact information on her phone. We need one loose thread, one person who knows something and is willing to talk. The rest will unravel from there. Who? Thomas Rivera's widow, Catherine Rivera. She never believed her husband killed himself, spoke to reporters about it, hired a private investigator, made enough noise that Vincent's people had to threaten her into silence. Adriana had remembered the details from a society column she'd read months ago, some fundraiser where Catherine Rivera had appeared looking haunted. She knows something. She just needs someone powerful enough to protect her while she talks. Dominic stood, decision crystallizing. Marcus, Pull everything you can find on Catherine Rivera, where she lives, who she talks to, what her daily routine looks like. I want a complete profile in 2 hours. Boss, if we approach her and Vincent finds out, he won't find out, because we're not sending anyone from the organization. Dominic turned to Adriana. You're going to talk to her. The statement landed like a physical impact. Adriana had expected to provide intelligence, maybe coordinate logistics. She hadn't expected to be sent into the field. Me? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I'm not an investigator. I'm not even... You're exactly what we need. Dominic moved closer, his expression intense. Catherine Rivera won't talk to my people. She's been threatened, traumatized, driven into silence by men with guns and bad intentions. But you? You're the boss's wife. Non-threatening, sympathetic. Someone who understands what it's like to be powerless in a world run by men like us. I'm not powerless anymore. No. But you remember what it felt like. And that's what she needs. Someone who understands her fear and can offer her a way out of it. Adriana considered the proposal. It was dangerous. If Vincent discovered she was investigating him, she'd become a target. But danger had stopped being a deterrent the moment she'd stolen the charger and reclaimed her identity. What do I offer her? Adriana asked. What makes her trust me enough to talk? The truth. Dominic's voice softened slightly. That her husband was murdered. That you can prove it. And that if she helps you, Vincent Moretti will face consequences for the first time in his life. 3 hours later, Adriana stood on the porch of a modest house in a suburb that existed in the space between working class and middle class aspirations. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed inappropriately beautiful given the conversation she was about to have. She'd changed clothes, the racing blacks were gone, replaced by a simple dress and cardigan that Marcus had somehow procured, probably from his wife's closet. Adriana looked respectable, sympathetic, safe. Exactly the image she needed to project. Catherine Rivera answered on the third knock. She was younger than Adriana expected, maybe 40, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, and the particular exhaustion that came from grief without closure. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. Catherine started to close the door. Your husband didn't kill himself. Adriana's words stopped the door mid-swing. Thomas was murdered, and I can prove it. Catherine's face went pale. Her hand trembled on the doorknob. Who are you? Someone who understands what it's like to be invisible, to know the truth and have nobody believe you, to be threatened into silence by people with more power than conscience. Adriana held Catherine's gaze. I'm Adriana Rinaldi, Dominic Rinaldi's wife, and I need your help to bring down the man who killed your husband. The silence stretched between them. Catherine's eyes searched Adriana's face, looking for deception, for threat, for the trap she'd learned to expect. Why should I trust you? Your husband is one of them, part of the same world that killed Thomas. You're right, he is. But the man who killed your husband isn't just Dominic's enemy. He's everyone's enemy. He's been killing people and calling it business. And if we don't stop him, he'll keep killing until nobody's left to challenge him. Catherine's hand dropped from the doorknob. She stood there, silhouetted against the warm light of her home, wrestling with a decision that could either bring justice or get her killed. Come in. She stepped back, opening the door fully. But if this is a trick, if you're here to hurt me, if I was here to hurt you, you'd already be hurt. Adriana stepped inside. I'm here because you're the only person brave enough to tell the truth. And I'm the only person positioned to make sure that truth actually matters. Inside Catherine's home was a museum of interrupted life. Photos of Thomas Rivera smiled from frames on every surface. A half-finished renovation project sat abandoned in the corner. The coffee table held stacks of documents, police reports, private investigator findings, newspaper clippings about other suspicious deaths. Catherine had been investigating on her own, connecting dots that nobody else wanted to see. I knew Thomas didn't kill himself. Catherine's voice was steady, but her hands shook as she gathered documents. He had no reason. Business was good. We were happy. And Thomas was Catholic. He would never have committed suicide. It wasn't in him. What did the police say? That he was under financial stress, that the construction business was more competitive than I knew, that sometimes people hide their problems until it's too late. Catherine's voice turned bitter. They found him in his car with a bottle of pills and a note. Case closed, suicide, move on. But you didn't move on. I hired a private investigator, Dennis Harper. He found irregularities. The note was typed, not handwritten. The pills in Thomas's system were a dosage that would have knocked him unconscious before he could have driven anywhere. And the parking garage where they found him, it was owned by a shell company. Let me guess, a shell company connected to Vincent Moretti. Catherine's eyes widened. How did you know? Because Vincent's been using the same tactics for 2 years. Eliminate competition, make it look natural, consolidate power while everyone's still processing the loss. Adriana sat down, gestured for Catherine to do the same. What happened to your investigator? Dennis disappeared 3 weeks after giving me his findings. Just vanished. His office was cleaned out. His files were gone. And I got a visit from 2 men who very politely explained that continuing to investigate would be bad for my health. You were threatened into silence. I was terrified into silence. Catherine's voice cracked. What was I supposed to do? I'm a widow with 2 kids, no resources, no protection, no way to fight back against people who could make me disappear as easily as they made Thomas and Dennis disappear. Adriana reached across the table, placed her hand over Catherine's. You survived. That took more courage than fighting back would have. And now you have resources, you have protection. You have someone who can actually do something with the truth you've been carrying. What can you do? You're married to a mob boss. You're part of their world. I'm part of their world, but I'm not powerless in it. Not anymore. Adriana's voice carried absolute certainty. I need everything you have, every document, every finding, every suspicion. And I need you to trust that I'll use it to make sure Vincent Moretti faces consequences. Catherine studied her for a long moment. Why are you doing this? What do you get out of exposing Vincent? Honestly, vindication. 3 years I've been told I don't matter, that I'm decoration, that I should be quiet and pretty and empty. Tonight I decided to be loud and dangerous and impossible to ignore. And taking down Vincent? Adriana smiled without humor. That's the loudest statement I can make. Catherine stood and retrieved a box from her bedroom. It was filled with documents, photos, recordings, everything she'd collected in her private investigation, everything she'd been too scared to show anyone. This is everything Dennis found before he disappeared. Financial records showing payments from Vincent's shell companies to the parking garage owner. Toxicology reports showing Thomas had enough sedatives in his system to incapacitate him. Witness statements from people who saw 2 men helping Thomas into his car that night. Men who matched descriptions of Vincent's security detail. Adriana went through the documents with focused intensity. Each piece built on the others, creating a picture of premeditated murder disguised as suicide. It wasn't just evidence, it was proof. This is enough. Adriana's voice was quiet. This is enough to prove Vincent killed your husband. And if he killed Thomas, he probably killed the others too. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to make sure the world knows. All 5 families, law enforcement, media, everyone. Vincent's been operating in shadows, but shadows disappear in direct light. Catherine's expression shifted between hope and fear. If you expose this, he'll come after me. After my kids. No, he won't. Because by the time this becomes public, Vincent will be too busy defending himself to worry about retaliation. And Dominic will make sure you have protection until it's safe. You trust your husband to protect me after everything. Adriana considered the question. Did she trust Dominic? 24 hours ago, the answer would have been simple, no. But in the last few hours, something had shifted between them. He'd listened to her assessments, acted on her intelligence, treated her as an equal rather than an accessory. Trust was too strong a word. But tentative alliance? That felt accurate. I trust that Dominic wants Vincent destroyed as much as you want justice for Thomas. And right now, those goals align. Adriana stood, gathering the documents. Stay here. Don't answer the door for anyone you don't know. I'll have someone watching your house within the hour. And then what? And then we burn Vincent's world down. Adriana left Catherine's house with a box full of evidence and a growing sense of momentum. This wasn't just about stopping a coup anymore. It was about exposing systematic murder, about proving that even the untouchable could be held accountable. She called Dominic from the car. He answered on the first ring. Do you have something? I have everything. Catherine Rivera kept detailed records. Dennis Harper was thorough before he disappeared. We have proof of murder, conspiracy, and cover-up. Enough to bury Vincent. Get back here. We need to strategize how to use this. No. Adriana's voice was firm. We don't strategize. We attack. Right now, while Vincent still thinks he's in control. We hit him before the summit, take away his platform before he can use it against you. Adriana? Trust me, Dominic. You've been trusting me for the last 12 hours. Trust me for 12 more. The silence on the other end stretched. Then quietly, what do you need? Media contacts. Someone who'll run with an explosive story without verifying it through official channels first. Someone hungry enough to take risks for a major scoop. I know someone. Investigative journalist. Been trying to expose organized crime for years. She'd kill for evidence like this. Get her on the phone. Tell her you have proof of multiple murders connected to Vincent Moretti. Tell her she has 6 hours to break the story before it goes to your competitor. 6 hours isn't much time for proper journalism. It's enough time to create chaos, and chaos is what we need. Dominic was quiet for a moment. You've changed. No, I've just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm starting to realize I never knew who you actually were. No, Adriana agreed. You didn't, but you're learning. She ended the call and drove back toward the city. The morning traffic was building, commuters heading to jobs that seemed impossibly normal compared to the world she'd inhabited for the last 12 hours. She'd raced cars, survived an assassination conspiracy, interrogated witnesses, and now she was coordinating a media attack against a Mafia boss. Nix would have been proud. The journalist Dominic contacted was named Rachel Morrison, and she had a reputation for aggressive investigation and zero fear of powerful enemies. She met Adriana in a coffee shop downtown, laptop open, recording device ready, eyes bright with the particular hunger of someone who'd finally caught the story they'd been chasing for years. Let me understand this correctly. Rachel's fingers paused over her keyboard. You're claiming Vincent Moretti has murdered at least 5 business competitors over the last 2 years, and you have documentation to prove it? I'm not claiming anything. Adriana slid a folder across the table. The evidence claims it. I'm just making sure you see it before Vincent has a chance to bury it. Rachel opened the folder and her eyes widened. She read in silence for 5 minutes, occasionally making notes, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock to barely contained excitement. This is incredible. Financial records, toxicology reports, witness statements. If even half of this is legitimate, all of it is legitimate. Catherine Rivera has been building this case for 6 months. Her private investigator disappeared after gathering this evidence. She's been too terrified to come forward until now. Why now? What changed? I changed? Adriana held Rachel's gaze. I convinced her that staying silent was more dangerous than speaking up, that Vincent's pattern would continue until someone stopped it. And you're willing to go on record? The wife of Dominic Rinaldi, publicly accusing Vincent Moretti of serial murder? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure this story breaks before the 5 Families Summit tonight. Can you do that? Rachel's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. I can have this online in 3 hours. Print edition by this afternoon. But you understand what you're starting? This isn't just exposing Vincent. This is declaring war. Vincent declared war when he planted a bomb in my husband's car. I'm just making sure he loses. Rachel studied her with new appreciation. You're not what I expected. Dominic Rinaldi's wife. I thought you'd be... She trailed off, searching for diplomatic phrasing. Quiet, decorative, invisible. Adriana smiled without warmth. I was, until I decided not to be. What changed your mind? My husband called me lifeless, so I decided to show him exactly how much life I actually have. Oh, Rachel laughed, sharp and genuine. I like you, and I'm going to enjoy writing this story. 3 hours later, Rachel Morrison's article went live on every major news platform simultaneously. The headline was surgical in its brutality. Mafia boss Vincent Moretti, serial killer hiding behind business empire. The evidence was laid out with journalistic precision. Thomas Rivera's murder, detailed with toxicology reports and witness statements. 3 other suspicious deaths, each connected through shell companies and financial trails leading back to Vincent. Dennis Harper's disappearance, documented with the last notes he'd sent to Catherine Rivera before vanishing. And at the center of it all, Catherine Rivera's testimony. A widow demanding justice. A mother protecting her children. A woman brave enough to name her husband's killer. The story detonated across the criminal underworld like a bomb far more devastating than the one Richard had planted. Within an hour, every major news outlet had picked it up. By noon, federal investigators had announced they were reviewing the evidence. By early afternoon, the other four family bosses had released carefully worded statements expressing concern and calling for a full investigation. Vincent Moretti's carefully constructed empire began to crack. Adriana watched the fallout from the safe house, monitoring news feeds and encrypted communications Marcus had set up. The Five Families Summit, scheduled for that evening, had been postponed indefinitely. Nobody wanted to be in the same room as Vincent while federal agents were building murder cases. Dominic stood beside her, watching the screens with grim satisfaction. He's finished. Even if he beats the criminal charges, he's lost credibility, lost allies, lost everything he spent 2 years building. He's wounded, Adriana corrected. Not finished. Wounded predators are the most dangerous kind. As if summoned by her words, Dominic's phone rang. Unknown number. He put it on speaker. You've made a serious mistake, Dominic. Vincent's voice was cold, controlled, deadly. Did you really think you could destroy me without consequences? I think I just proved I could. Dominic's voice matched Vincent's ice. Your conspiracy is exposed. Your murders are public. You're done. I'm done, Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're delusional. All you've done is escalate this into open warfare. And in war, everyone loses. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You and your clever little wife think you've won because you got some journalist to print allegations. But allegations aren't convictions, and wars aren't won by publicity. They're won by whoever's willing to go furthest. The line went dead. Adriana and Dominic stood in the resulting silence, the weight of Vincent's words settling over them like ash. He's going to retaliate. Adriana's voice was quiet. Hard. Immediately. He has nothing left to lose. Let him try. Dominic's jaw was set. We'll be ready. But even as he said it, Adriana saw the flicker of concern in his eyes. They'd wounded Vincent, exposed him, humiliated him publicly, and now they'd have to survive his response. Vincent's retaliation came faster than even Adriana predicted. 40 minutes after his call, Marcus burst through the safe house door with an expression that made Dominic's hand immediately move to his weapon. Catherine Rivera's house is on fire. Marcus's words came out sharp, clipped. Firefighters are calling it arson. Accelerant patterns consistent with professional work. Catherine and her kids got out, but barely. They're at the hospital with smoke inhalation. Adriana felt ice slide through her veins. She'd promised Catherine protection, had someone watching the house, and Vincent had still gotten through. How? Dominic's voice was deadly quiet. We had 2 of our people on surveillance. How did someone get past them? They didn't get past them. They went through them. Marcus pulled up footage on his phone. Security camera from a neighbor's doorbell. Watch. The video showed a white van pulling up to Catherine's house. 4 men emerged, moving with military precision. One of them walked directly to the car, where Dominic's surveillance team sat and fired twice through the windshield. No hesitation, no negotiation, just execution. Then the men doused Catherine's porch with liquid from containers, struck a match, and were gone before the flames fully caught. Professional hit squad. Dominic's jaw clenched. Vincent called in outside talent. People we wouldn't recognize. He's escalating beyond normal protocols. Marcus looked shaken. Killing our people in the open. Burning civilian homes. This isn't about business anymore. It's about sending a message. The message is clear. Adriana's voice was steady, despite the rage building in her chest. He's telling us that exposing him doesn't make us safe, that he can still reach anyone we try to protect, that fighting him has consequences. Catherine and her kids need to disappear. Dominic was already moving, gathering weapons from a hidden cache in the safe house. Marcus, get them into federal protection. Witness security, full coverage, I don't care what it costs. Already arranged, marshals are picking them up from the hospital. They'll be in a secure location within the hour. Good. Dominic loaded a magazine into a handgun with practiced efficiency. Now we need to figure out where Vincent is and end this before he kills anyone else. He won't be at his estate. Adriana moved to the window, her mind working through tactical possibilities. Too obvious, too exposed now that he's a public target. He'll be somewhere fortified, somewhere with multiple exits and loyal security. His warehouse complex on the river. Marcus pulled up a map on his phone. Owns it through shell companies. Uses it for storage and off-books meetings. The building's a fortress. Reinforced walls, limited access points, security that answers only to him. How many people does he have with him? Unknown, but if he's planning to weather this crisis, he'd want his most trusted lieutenants close. Maybe a dozen people. Maybe more if he's called in additional muscle. Adriana studied the map, her racing instincts translating architectural layouts into tactical opportunities. What's the surrounding area? Industrial zone, mostly abandoned. River access on one side, rail yards on the other. No civilians to worry about, but also no cover if things go loud. Things are going to go loud. Dominic checked his weapon. Vincent just murdered 2 of my people and tried to kill a civilian witness. This ends tonight. You can't assault a fortified position with the people you have here. Adriana's voice cut through his anger. Vincent's expecting direct confrontation. He's prepared for it. You go in with guns blazing, he'll turn it into a massacre and claim self-defense. So what do you suggest? We wait while he picks off everyone connected to us. I suggest we make him come to us. Draw him out of his fortress into territory where we control the variables. Dominic turned to face her fully. How? By giving him a target he can't resist. Adriana met his eyes. Me. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stopped moving. Dominic's expression went very still. Absolutely not. Dominic's voice was flat. You're not bait. I'm the perfect bait. I'm the one who started this, who convinced Catherine to talk, who coordinated with Rachel Morrison. Vincent's entire empire is crumbling because of actions I took. If anyone's his primary target right now, it's me. Which is exactly why you're staying here, protected, away from anywhere he can reach you. Protected didn't save your surveillance team. Protected didn't save Catherine's house from burning. Vincent has resources and professionals and nothing left to lose. If he wants to reach me, eventually he will. Better to control when and where that happens. Marcus cleared his throat carefully. She has a point, boss. Vincent's operating outside normal parameters now. We can't predict his moves if he's willing to break every rule. I don't care if she has a point. Dominic's voice rose slightly, the first real emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. I'm not using my wife as bait in a trap that could get her killed. Why? Adriana's question was genuine. 24 hours ago, I was decoration, lifeless. Something you placed where it looked good and ignored otherwise. Why does it suddenly matter if I'm at risk? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to address. Dominic stared at her, and Adriana saw something complex working behind his eyes. Calculation, concern, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Because I was wrong. His voice came out quieter. About you. About everything I thought you were. And I'm not interested in getting you killed before I have a chance to understand who you actually are. The admission landed with unexpected weight. Adriana felt something shift in her chest, some barrier she'd constructed 3 years ago developing new cracks. Then help me survive this. Her voice matched his quiet intensity. Not by hiding me away, but by trusting that I know what I'm doing. I've kept myself alive in your world for 3 years by being invisible. Now I need you to trust that I can stay alive while being visible. Dominic looked at Marcus, some wordless communication passing between them. Marcus shrugged slightly, his expression suggesting this was above his pay grade. If we do this, Dominic said carefully, we do it my way. Full security protocols, backup plans, multiple exit strategies. At the first sign things are going wrong, you get out. Understood? Understood. I mean it, Adriana. This isn't a race where you can push past safe limits and rely on skill to pull you through. This is a combat situation with people trained to kill. You don't improvise. You follow the plan exactly. I will. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then turned to Marcus. Set it up, but do it smart. I want Overwatch positions, backup teams, and emergency extraction ready before we make any move. The plan took shape over the next 2 hours. Adriana would surface publicly, making herself visible and trackable. They'd leak her location through channels Vincent had proven he could monitor, create an opportunity too perfect to resist. And when Vincent sent his people to eliminate the threat she represented, Dominic's team would be waiting. The location they chose was a parking garage downtown. Multiple levels, excellent sight lines, controlled access points, and civilian traffic sparse enough that collateral damage was minimal. Marcus positioned sharpshooters on surrounding buildings. Dominic placed tactical teams at each entrance, and Adriana would be in the center of it all, the lure drawing Vincent's people into the trap. You'll wear a vest. Dominic handed her a ballistic vest, lightweight, but rated for rifle rounds. Non-negotiable. Adriana put it on without argument. The weight was unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. Like wearing armor. Like acknowledging she was walking into a battlefield. Earpiece for communication. Marcus fitted her with a nearly invisible comm unit. Dominic and I will be listening to everything. You get scared, you say the word sunrise. That's the abort signal. Everyone extracts immediately. I won't get scared. Everyone gets scared. Marcus's voice was kind. It's what you do with the fear that matters. Dominic approached as Marcus stepped away. He carried something wrapped in leather. One more thing. He unwrapped the leather to reveal a compact handgun. A Glock 43, small enough to conceal but deadly at close range. I don't know how to shoot. Adriana stared at the weapon. Point and pull the trigger. It's simpler than shifting gears at 140 miles an hour. Dominic placed it in her hands, adjusting her grip. Safety's here, round in the chamber. If someone gets close enough that you need this, don't hesitate. Don't warn them. Just shoot center mass and keep shooting until they stop moving. Adriana felt the weight of the gun in her palm. Heavier than it looked, more real than any weapon she'd held before. I've never killed anyone. Hopefully you won't have to tonight. But if it comes down to you or them, choose you, every time. Dominic's hands covered hers on the weapon. Promise me. I promise. They arrived at the parking garage as afternoon faded into evening. The sun painted the sky in violent shades of orange and red, appropriate for what was coming. Adriana took position on the third level, standing beside the Charger they deliberately parked in clear view, the same car she'd stolen from the gala, the same car she'd driven in her triumphant return to racing. Now it was bait, and so was she. All teams in position. Marcus's voice came through her earpiece. Overwatch confirms no hostile movement yet. Streets are clear. She's visible? Dominic's voice, tense but controlled. Visible and trackable. We leaked her location through 3 different channels. If Vincent's monitoring any of them, he knows exactly where she is. Adriana stood in the open, refusing to hide or appear nervous. She was Nyx, the woman who'd never lost a race, the woman who'd survived 3 years in a world that wanted her silent and small. If Vincent wanted to come for her, let him come. She'd be ready. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Adriana's legs started to ache from standing still, her racing instincts rebelling against motionlessness. She wanted to move, to pace, to burn off the adrenaline building in her system. Movement. One of the Overwatch snipers spoke through the comm. 2 vehicles approaching from the north, black SUVs, tinted windows, matching the profile of Vincent's tactical teams. Confirmed. Another sniper. I count 8 hostiles, 4 per vehicle, armed, approaching the garage entrance. Adriana's heart rate spiked. This was happening. This was real. Steady. Dominic's voice in her ear, calm and grounding. You're not alone. We have eyes on every angle. Just stay where you are and let them come to you. The SUVs entered the garage, their engines echoing off concrete walls. They circled up the ramps, methodical and unhurried, professionals clearing levels, ensuring no surprises. 3rd level, Marcus reported. They're coming to you. The SUVs emerged from the ramp and stopped 30 feet from where Adriana stood, engines idling, windows still dark. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then all 4 doors on both vehicles opened simultaneously. 8 men emerged, each wearing tactical gear and carrying weapons with the casual familiarity of people who use them regularly. They fanned out in a practiced formation, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every angle. Adriana recognized the formation, recognized the precision. These weren't street thugs or low-level enforcers. These were professionals. Former military, probably. The kind of people Vincent would hire when he needed guaranteed results. One of them stepped forward, tall, lean, with a scar running down his left cheek. He carried an automatic rifle with the ease of long practice. Adriana Rinaldi. His voice carried across the space between them. You've caused quite a bit of trouble. I've caused truth. Adriana kept her voice steady. There's a difference. Truth, lies, doesn't matter to me. I get paid either way. He gestured with his rifle. Mr. Moretti sends his regards. Says to make sure you understand the cost of interfering in business that doesn't concern you. Business? Adriana felt anger cutting through fear. He murdered people, burned a woman's house with her children inside. That's not business. That's butchery. Like I said, doesn't matter to me. The scarred man raised his rifle. Nothing personal. Now! Dominic's voice erupted through the calm. Everything happened at once. The Overwatch snipers fired, precise shots that took down two of Vincent's men before they could react. Dominic's tactical team stormed in from both stairwells, weapons raised, shouting commands. The garage transformed from empty space into a kill box in seconds. But Vincent's people were professionals too. They responded instantly, taking cover behind their vehicles, returning fire with disciplined accuracy. Bullets sparked off concrete, glass shattered, the air filled with cordite and chaos. Adriana dove behind the charger as rounds punched through the space where she'd been standing. Her hand found the Glock Dominic had given her, pulling it free with trembling fingers. The world had narrowed to the sound of gunfire and the thunder of her own heartbeat. Stay down, Dominic's voice in her ear, sharp with urgency. We've got this. But they didn't have it. Vincent's team was too good, too prepared. They'd anticipated the ambush, planned for it. One of them produced a grenade, pulled the pin, and threw it toward Dominic's tactical team. Grenade! Someone shouted. The explosion was massive, a pressure wave that rattled the charger and sent Adriana's ears ringing. Screams followed. Adriana risked a glance and saw two of Dominic's people down, injured or dead, she couldn't tell which. The balance had shifted. Vincent's team pressed their advantage, advancing with covering fire, their formation still intact despite losses. Fall back, Marcus's voice. All teams fall back to secondary positions. But falling back meant leaving Adriana exposed. The charger provided cover from the front, but the advancing team would flank her in seconds. She'd be trapped, defenseless, exactly where Vincent wanted her. Adriana's racing instincts kicked in. The same instincts that had kept her alive through 100 races at impossible speeds. The same pattern recognition that let her read a course 3 moves ahead. She saw the geometry of the situation, the angles of attack, the split-second window of opportunity. The charger's keys were in her pocket. She'd kept them there by habit, some part of her unwilling to be separated from the means of escape. She didn't think. Thinking would mean hesitating, and hesitation meant death. Adriana lunged into the charger's driver's seat, keeping low, and shoved the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. She threw the car into reverse and punched the accelerator. The charger shot backward, tires screaming, smoke pouring from the wheel wells. Vincent's team scattered, diving out of the path of 2 tons of American muscle moving at lethal velocity. Adriana spun the wheel, executing a perfect J-turn that rotated the car 180 degrees and left her facing the exit ramp. She shifted to drive and accelerated hard, the charger's engine howling. What are you doing? Dominic's voice in her ear, confused and angry. Surviving! Adriana took the down ramp at a speed that would have terrified anyone who couldn't drive like she could. The charger's suspension protested, but held. Behind her, Vincent's team was already moving. She heard engines starting, saw headlights flare in her mirrors. They were coming after her. Good. Let them chase. Let them think she was panicking, running scared. She'd been racing since before they learned to drive. This was her element, her territory, her advantage. Adriana, stop the car! Dominic's command was sharp. You're leaving our protection zone. Your protection zone just became a war zone. I'm drawing them away from your people. She took a corner hard, the charger's rear end sliding in controlled drift. Trust me. She burst out of the parking garage into evening traffic. Horns blared as she cut across 3 lanes, weaving between vehicles with inches to spare. Behind her, the 2 SUVs followed, their drivers good but not exceptional. They had power and aggression. She had skill and absolute confidence. Adriana led them away from the business district toward the industrial areas she knew from her racing days. Abandoned streets, long straights, tight corners that would favor maneuverability over brute force. "All units pursue," Marcus's voice. "Don't let them take her." "Belay that," Dominic's voice cut through. "She knows what she's doing. Set up intercepts at the port access roads. She's heading toward the river." He was right. Adriana was heading toward the river, toward the warehouse district, toward terrain she knew, like the back of her hand. Places she'd raced through in the dead of night when the underground circuit needed venues that police wouldn't patrol. She pushed the Charger past 90, past 100, the engine singing with the particular music of pure performance. The SUVs kept pace, but she could see them struggling. They were built for power, not agility, and agility was what the next phase required. Adriana approached a railroad crossing at 110 miles per hour. Warning lights were flashing, gates were descending, a freight train was coming. This was the moment. The choice that separated drivers from racers, the line between calculated risk and suicide. She'd made this choice before, multiple times, had never been wrong yet. Adriana didn't brake, didn't hesitate. She aimed the Charger at the narrowing gap between descending gates and accelerated. The car shot through with less than a second to spare. The gates crashed down behind her, and the freight train roared past, cutting her off from pursuit. She'd bought herself maybe 90 seconds, enough time to reach the warehouse complex where Vincent was hiding. "That was insane!" Marcus's voice carried a mixture of awe and horror. "You just jumped a train." "I bought us time." Adriana took a breath, her hand steady on the wheel despite her racing heart. "Where's Vincent?" "A warehouse complex, 2 miles from your position." Dominic's voice was controlled, but she heard something underneath it. Pride, maybe. Or recognition. "But Adriana, you can't assault that position alone. Wait for backup." "I'm not assaulting anything. I'm knocking on the front door." She arrived at Vincent's warehouse complex 3 minutes later. It was exactly as Marcus described. A fortress. Reinforced walls, limited access, security cameras covering every approach. The kind of place you'd build if you expected to weather a siege. Adriana parked the Charger directly in front of the main entrance where every camera would see her. She sat there for a moment, gathering herself, then stepped out of the car. The front door was solid steel, built to withstand forced entry. Adriana walked up to it and knocked. Hard. 3 times. "What are you doing?" Dominic's voice in her ear, tight with concern. "Negotiating." The door opened slightly. A man with a tactical vest and assault rifle peered out. "You've got some nerve showing up here." "I need to talk to Vincent, face to face. No weapons. No games. Just conversation." "Boss doesn't want to talk to you. Boss wants you dead." "Then he should have sent better people to kill me." Adriana's voice was cold. "I just led his tactical team into a freight train. They're probably still waiting for it to pass. So tell Vincent that Adriana Rinaldi is standing on his doorstep, unarmed, asking for 5 minutes of his time. Tell him if he's not a coward, he'll give it to me." The door slammed shut. Adriana stood there, aware of how exposed she was, how vulnerable. Every camera was watching her. Every gun in that building could be aimed at her. One order from Vincent and she'd be cut down where she stood. But Vincent wouldn't give that order. Not yet. She'd called him a coward, challenged his pride, and prideful men always took the bait. The door opened again. This time, Vincent Moretti himself stood in the entrance. He was younger than Dominic, maybe mid-40s, handsome in a calculated way that suggested expensive grooming and careful attention to image. His suit was immaculate despite the crisis consuming his empire. 5 minutes. His voice was smooth, controlled. "Then my people kill you." "Fair enough." Adriana stepped inside. The warehouse interior was exactly what she expected. Open floor plan converted into a command center. Computer stations tracking news feeds, maps marking territories, armed men positioned at strategic points. This wasn't just a hideout, it was Vincent's war room. He led her to a makeshift office area, gestured to a chair. Adriana sat, aware of the guns trained on her from multiple angles. "You've destroyed me." Vincent's tone was almost conversational. "Exposed murders I spent years covering up. turned the other families against me, made me a target for federal investigation, all because you decided to stop being the quiet wife. You destroyed yourself. Adriana met his eyes without flinching. I just made sure everyone saw it. And now you walk into my headquarters, alone, and ask to talk. Either you're the bravest person I've ever met, or the stupidest. Neither. I'm practical. Your empire is finished, Vincent. You know it. I know it. The only question is how much damage you do on your way down. How many more people die because you can't accept that you lost? I haven't lost. But his voice lacked conviction. You have. The moment Rachel Morrison published that article, you lost. Everything since then has just been the structure collapsing. Adriana leaned forward. But here's what I'm offering. Surrender. Walk away. Disappear. Take whatever money you've hidden offshore and vanish. Stop trying to kill people who exposed you. Stop burning houses. Stop the violence. Vincent laughed, sharp and bitter. And in exchange for this generous offer, what do I get besides my life? You get to keep your life. That's not a small thing. Dominic wants you dead. The other families want you gone. Federal investigators want to put you in prison forever. But if you disappear completely and permanently, I'll convince Dominic to let you go. No pursuit, no retaliation, clean break. You think you have that kind of influence over your husband? 24 hours ago, I didn't. Today, yes, I do. Vincent studied her, trying to read deception or weakness. Why would you do this? Why offer me mercy after everything? Because I'm tired of people dying. Because Catherine Rivera's children deserve to grow up without more trauma. Because ending this war benefits everyone except your pride. Adriana held his gaze. And because killing you would be easy. Letting you live with the knowledge that you were beaten by the woman you dismissed as decoration? That's the real punishment. The silence stretched. Vincent's jaw worked, pride warring with survival instinct. Then his phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression darkening. Understood. He ended the call and looked at Adriana. That was my attorney. Federal agents just raided my primary accounts. Seized assets worth $200 million. They're building a RICO case. Multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, racketeering. Then my offer's the only one you're going to get. Vincent stood, walked to the window overlooking his warehouse. You know what the worst part is? I spent 2 years planning Dominic's downfall. 2 years infiltrating his organization, building evidence, positioning myself to take everything. And I would have succeeded, should have succeeded, except I underestimated his wife. A lot of people have underestimated me. They don't usually get a second chance. Vincent turned back to face her. If I accept your offer, how do I know Dominic honors it? Because I'll make sure he does. You have my word. The word of a woman I don't know, who appeared out of nowhere with skills nobody suspected, who dismantled my empire in less than 24 hours. He smiled without humor. Your word might be worth more than anything else in this world right now. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Stand down. All operations, complete cessation of hostilities. Yes, I'm sure. Do it now. Vincent ended the call and looked at Adriana. I'm taking your offer. But understand this. If Dominic comes after me anyway, if this is a trap, I will spend whatever life I have left making both of you regret it. It's not a trap. It's survival. For all of us. Adriana stood and walked toward the exit. Every gun in the warehouse tracked her movement, but none fired. Vincent had given the order, and his people obeyed. She stepped out into the night air, the Charger waiting exactly where she'd left it. She got in, started the engine, and only then allowed herself to breathe fully. Did you just negotiate a surrender? Dominic's voice in her ear, stunned. Vincent's standing down. Complete cessation. He's going to disappear. In exchange, you let him go. No pursuit, no retaliation. It's over. Adriana, it's over, Dominic. Accept the win. We exposed him, destroyed his conspiracy, saved lives. Let him run. Let him live with defeat. That's punishment enough. The silence on the other end stretched for long seconds, then quietly, okay, your call. We let him go. Adriana drove back toward the safe house, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She'd been awake for more than 36 hours, had raced fought, investigated, and negotiated, had transformed from invisible wife to undeniable force. And somehow, impossibly, she'd survived. Dominic was waiting outside the safe house when Adriana pulled up in the Charger. He stood in the amber glow of a streetlight, his expression unreadable, his posture carrying the tension of a man who'd spent the last hour not knowing if his wife would return alive. Adriana killed the engine and stepped out. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the distance of the sidewalk. Two people who'd been married for 3 years and were only now actually seeing each other. "You negotiated with Vincent Moretti." Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. "Alone, in his fortress, surrounded by his armed men." "I did." "That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most reckless." Marcus said the same thing earlier, about bravery and stupidity. Adriana moved closer. "I'm starting to think they might be the same quality, just with different outcomes. You could have been killed. I could have been killed a dozen times in the last 36 hours, racing at the docks, confronting you, drawing out Vincent's hit squad, jumping a freight train." She stopped directly in front of him. "But I wasn't, because I'm better at surviving than anyone gave me credit for." Dominic reached out, his hand settling on her shoulder with unexpected gentleness. "I gave you credit. Eventually. Just took me 3 years too long to do it. Better late than never." He pulled her into an embrace that surprised them both. Not the performative touching they'd done at galas and public events. Real contact. His arms around her, her head against his chest, both of them standing in the quiet night acknowledging that they'd survived something that should have destroyed them. "I thought I'd lost you." Dominic's voice was rough. "When you drove out of that parking garage with Vincent's people chasing you. When you jumped the train. When you walked into his warehouse. Every moment I thought this was when it happened. When the woman I just discovered existed would be taken away before I could understand who she was." Adriana pulled back enough to look at him. "You didn't lose me. You found me. Finally." "I did." His hand came up, cupping her face. "And I'm not interested in losing you again. Which means we need to talk, really talk, about what happens next." They went inside where Marcus had coffee brewing and a secure laptop displaying news feeds from every major outlet. The story of Vincent Moretti's fall dominated every channel. Federal raids, murder investigations, the spectacular collapse of a criminal empire that had seemed untouchable just 48 hours ago. "Catherine Rivera and her kids are in protective custody." Marcus handed them both coffee. "Marshals have them somewhere in the Midwest, new identities, new lives. She wanted me to tell you thank you." "She deserves more than thanks." Adriana accepted the coffee gratefully. "She deserves justice. Real justice. Seeing Vincent prosecuted for what he did. She'll get it. Maybe not immediately, but the federal case is solid. Even if Vincent disappears, the evidence remains. Thomas Rivera's murder will be solved. The others too." Marcus pulled up additional screens. "And the moles in our organization have been identified and removed. Sandra Reeves is gone. Tommy Moretti is gone. Jimmy Pescatore confessed everything and is cooperating with federal investigators." "What about Richard?" Adriana asked. "Witness protection. Full immunity in exchange for testimony. His sister's medical expenses are covered. He gets to live with what he did, but he lives." Marcus looked at Dominic. "You made the right call, boss. Keeping him alive gave us leverage we needed." Dominic nodded, but his attention was on Adriana. "You convinced me to spare Richard, to negotiate with Vincent, to choose strategy over violence. 3 years we were married, and I never knew you could think tactically. 3 years you never asked." Adriana set down her coffee. "You wanted a decorative wife, so that's what I gave you, but decoration was never who I was, just a role I played to survive." "I know that now." Dominic moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "The question is what happens next. We can't go back to how things were. I can't unknow what I've learned about you. Can't pretend you're the silent woman who stood beside me at galas." "I wouldn't want you to." Adriana joined him at the window. "That woman is gone. She was never real anyway. But what replaces her? What does our marriage look like when it's not built on me erasing myself?" "I don't know." Dominic's honesty was stark. "I've never had a partnership like what you're describing. In my world, wives are assets. Protected, provided for, but ultimately separate from the actual business of running an organization. Then your world needs to evolve, because I'm not interested in being an asset. I'm interested in being an equal, a partner who contributes, who has voice and authority, who matters beyond looking good at public events. You're asking me to change fundamental structures, to give you real power in an organization built on traditional hierarchies. I'm asking you to recognize that I already have power. I proved it in the last 36 hours. Proved I can gather intelligence, coordinate operations, negotiate settlements, and handle myself in crisis situations. The only question is whether you're smart enough to use that capability instead of waste it. Marcus cleared his throat from across the room. If I can offer an observation? The boss's wife just took down Vincent Moretti's entire operation with minimal resources and zero official authority. Imagine what she could do with actual support and organizational backing. Dominic turned from the window, a slight smile tugging at his mouth. You're right, which is terrifying and exciting in equal measure. He looked at Adriana directly. Okay, you want to be a partner. Not decoration, not accessory, but actual working partner in running this organization? Yes. Then we restructure, completely. You get authority over intelligence and strategy. You attend all major meetings. You have access to financial records, operational plans, personnel decisions. Real power, real responsibility, real voice in how we do business. In exchange for what? In exchange for staying, for choosing this marriage not because you're trapped in it, but because you actually want to be here. Building something new together instead of maintaining something broken. Adriana considered his offer. It was more than she'd expected, more than she'd allowed herself to hope for when she'd stolen the charger and reclaimed her identity. But was it enough? Could she actually build a life in this world, even with power and authority? The answer surprised her with its clarity, yes, because this world wasn't just Dominic's anymore. It was hers too. She'd bled for it, fought for it, proved she belonged in it not as decoration, but as force. I'll stay. Her voice was firm. But I have conditions. Name them. We legitimize parts of the business, not all of it. I'm practical enough to know that's impossible. But the violence, the unnecessary brutality, that ends. We protect people instead of exploiting them. We build instead of destroy. And we create something that doesn't require me to ignore murder to sleep at night. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. That's asking me to change who I am, how I've operated for 15 years. No, it's asking you to evolve into who you could be. Vincent built an empire on murder and intimidation, and look where it got him. You have a chance to build something different, something sustainable, something that doesn't inevitably collapse under its own corruption. And you think you can help me build that? I know I can, if you're willing to let me try. Dominic extended his hand, not as boss to subordinate, not as husband to wife in the traditional sense, as one equal to another, offering partnership built on mutual respect and genuine capability. Adriana took his hand, shook it firmly, sealed an agreement that transformed everything. Marcus raised his coffee mug in mock salute. To new partnerships, and to the scariest power couple I've ever had the privilege of working for. The next 3 months moved faster than Adriana could have imagined. True to his word, Dominic restructured the organization completely. Adriana became official head of intelligence and strategy, with full authority over information gathering, threat assessment, and operational planning. She had an office in the downtown headquarters, a staff of analysts who reported directly to her, and access to resources she'd only dreamed about during her invisible years. But more than the structural changes, the culture shifted. Adriana pushed hard for legitimization of business operations. They divested from the most violent enterprises, drug trafficking, human trafficking, anything that exploited the vulnerable. They invested instead in legitimate businesses that could be defended publicly. Real estate development, technology ventures, import-export operations that danced along legal lines without crossing them. The other families watched with skepticism at first. Dominic Rinaldi going soft, they whispered, letting his wife dictate policy, abandoning the old ways. Then they saw the results. Profits actually increased as legitimate operations proved more sustainable than criminal ones. Federal attention decreased as the organization became harder to prosecute. and the Rinaldi family's reputation evolved from dangerous to powerful in ways that commanded respect without requiring constant violence. 6 months after the night she'd stolen the charger, Adriana stood in front of the five families' council for the first time. Not as decoration standing silently behind Dominic, as an equal participant with her own seat at the table and her own voice in family politics. Marco Castellano, whose car she'd stolen and whose gala she'd abandoned, looked at her with something approaching awe. I never would have believed it if I hadn't seen the transformation myself. The quiet wife who became the strategic mind behind the Rinaldi family's evolution. I was never quiet. Adriana's voice was pleasant, but firm. I was just waiting for someone to ask my opinion. Well, you certainly have our attention now. This from Anthony DeLuca, head of the Boston family. Your intelligence work on the Moretti conspiracy was exceptional. We'd like to contract your services for threat assessment on our operations. It was a remarkable request. One family asking to pay another for strategic services, treating Adriana's expertise as valuable commodity rather than suspicious innovation. We can discuss terms. Adriana pulled out a tablet, already prepared with proposal documents. She'd anticipated this request, had intelligence suggesting DeLuca was facing internal threats similar to what Vincent had orchestrated. But my rates aren't cheap, and my recommendations aren't always what clients want to hear. We don't want to hear what we want to hear, DeLuca leaned forward. We want to hear the truth. That's apparently your specialty. The meeting continued for 3 hours. By the end, Adriana had contracts with 3 of the 5 families for intelligence services. She'd positioned herself not just as Dominic's wife, but as an independent power in the criminal landscape. Someone whose expertise was valued enough that even potential rivals wanted access to it. Dominic watched her work with visible pride. This was his wife. Not the decoration he'd dismissed 3 years ago, but the strategic force she'd always been beneath the surface. That night, they returned to the estate that had felt like a gilded cage when Adriana first arrived as a new bride. The same rooms, the same furniture, the same architectural bones, but everything felt different now. Adriana walked through spaces that no longer confined her. The grand foyer where she'd learned to smile emptily. The ballroom where she'd stood silent through 100 events. The bedroom she'd shared with a man who'd never truly seen her. Dominic found her in his office, looking at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows. Thinking about the gala? He moved to stand beside her. The night everything changed? Thinking about all the nights before it. All the times I stood exactly like this, looking out at the city, feeling like I was watching life happen instead of living it. Adriana turned to face him. I don't feel that way anymore. What do you feel? Alive, real, like I finally exist in full dimension instead of as a shadow. She moved closer. You asked me once why I was helping you, why I chose to stay instead of walking away when I had the chance. I remember. I'm still figuring out the complete answer, but part of it is this. You were the first person who ever actually saw me. Not the mask, not the role. Me, the real person underneath. Her hand found his. It took a crisis to make it happen, but you looked past what you wanted me to be and saw who I actually was. That's rarer than you might think. I should have seen you sooner. Maybe, but you see me now. That's what matters. Dominic pulled her closer, his arms around her waist, her hands on his shoulders. They stood like that, 2 people who'd been strangers living in the same house for 3 years, finally learning what intimacy actually meant. I have something for you. Dominic stepped back and pulled a small box from his desk drawer. Been waiting for the right moment to give you this. Adriana opened the box to find keys. Not house keys or car keys. These were different, marked with a logo she recognized from the underground racing circuit. Custom garage. Dominic's voice was warm. Down by the old docks. Climate-controlled, full equipment, enough space for 6 vehicles. Thought you might want a place to work on cars again. Rebuild the collection you gave up when we got married. Adriana stared at the keys, emotion tightening her throat. You bought me a garage? I bought you freedom. Space to be Nix again whenever you need to be. To race, to build, to exist outside of the organization and our marriage and everything else. He placed his hands over hers, closing her fingers around the keys. I took away your identity once. I'm giving you the means to reclaim it completely. Dominic, I mean it, Adriana. I don't want you to be only my wife. I don't want you to lose yourself trying to fit into my world. I want you to be everything you are. Nix and Adriana, racer and strategist, independent force, and my partner. All of it. Adriana looked at the keys in her palm, feeling the weight of them. The weight of being truly seen, truly valued, truly free to be complex and multifaceted instead of reduced to a single, decorative role. She kissed him then, fierce and genuine, nothing performative or obligatory about it. Real connection between two people who'd finally learned how to be honest with each other. When they broke apart, Adriana was smiling. I'm going to make you regret giving me access to a custom garage. I'll be there every night rebuilding engines instead of attending your boring business dinners. Good. I was getting tired of those dinners anyway. Liar. You love the political maneuvering? I love watching you eviscerate people with perfectly polite observations more. Dominic's expression turned serious. I know we still have work to do, years of damage to repair, trust to rebuild, but I think we have a chance at something real now, if we both want it. I want it. Adriana's voice was certain. Not the marriage we had before. Something new. Something built on who we actually are, instead of who we pretended to be. Then let's build it. Together. 1 year after the night she'd stolen Marco Castellano's Charger and reclaimed her identity, Adriana stood in her custom garage, hands covered in grease, working on a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda she'd been restoring for months. The space was everything Dominic had promised. Professional equipment, perfect lighting, enough room to work on multiple projects simultaneously. But the best part wasn't the equipment or the space. It was the freedom. The ability to spend hours here, lost in mechanical puzzles, existing as Nix without explanation or apology. The garage door opened. Dominic stepped in, loosening his tie, carrying takeout bags from the Thai place Adriana loved. Thought you might be hungry. He set the food on her workbench. You've been here since noon. Lost track of time. This carburetor is being stubborn. Adriana wiped her hands on a rag. But I think I've got it figured out. You always do. Dominic leaned against the Barracuda, looking comfortable in her space. Had a meeting with the DeLuca family today. They're incredibly pleased with your threat assessment work. Prevented an internal coup before it could develop. Anthony wants to put you on permanent retainer. Tell him I'll consider it, for double my current rate. Already negotiated triple. You're too valuable to undersell. Adriana laughed, genuine and free. You're getting better at this supportive partner thing. I'm learning from the best. He gestured at the garage. Speaking of which, there's a race next weekend, underground circuit, high stakes, invitation only. Thought you might be interested. Adriana's eyes lit up. She hadn't raced competitively since that first night, choosing to focus on the organizational restructuring and building her intelligence network. But the hunger never fully left. The need for speed, for the crystalline focus that came from pushing machines to their absolute limits. You want me to race? I want you to do whatever makes you feel alive. If that's racing, race. If that's restoring vintage cars in peace, do that. If that's both, do both. Dominic moved closer. I'm done telling you who to be, Adriana. I'm just here to support whoever you choose to be on any given day. Even if who I choose to be is terrifying and dangerous, especially then. You're never more yourself than when you're terrifying. They ate Thai food sitting on the hood of the Barracuda, talking about upcoming races and intelligence contracts and the complicated politics of running a semi-legitimate criminal organization. Two partners who'd found their way to genuine connection through crisis and transformation. Later that night, back at the estate, Adriana stood in the same ballroom where she'd overheard Dominic call her lifeless decoration. The room was empty now, quiet, just polished floors and crystal chandeliers and memories of being invisible. Dominic found her there, understanding without words why she'd come back to this space. Haunted? He asked gently. Exorcised. Adriana turned to face him. I needed to stand here one more time, in this room where I was nothing, where I stood silent and empty and completely erased. Needed to feel the difference between who I was then and who I am now. And I'm never that woman again. Never silent when I should speak. Never small when I could be large. Never decoration when I could be engine. She took his hand. Thank you for that. For seeing me. For letting me become fully myself, even when it was uncomfortable and inconvenient and forced you to change too. You don't need to thank me for basic human decency. In your world? Yes, I do. Because basic human decency is rarer than you think, especially toward women who threaten traditional power structures. You don't threaten power structures. Dominic smiled. You dismantle and rebuild them entirely. Much more impressive. They danced then, in the empty ballroom, no music playing, just the two of them moving together in comfortable silence. Not the performative dancing they'd done at galas. Real movement, real connection. Two people who'd learned to see each other and were still discovering what that meant. 5 years after the night everything changed, Adriana's intelligence firm had expanded beyond the 5 families to serve legitimate corporations, private security firms, and even government agencies looking for threat assessment without bureaucratic constraints. She ran operations from a downtown high-rise, employing former intelligence analysts and street-smart investigators who understood that the best information came from unconventional sources. But she still raced, still spent nights at the underground circuits, reminding herself and everyone else that Nyx had never truly retired. Her win record remained undefeated. Her legend had only grown. And at home, her marriage to Dominic had evolved into something neither had imagined possible. True partnership, genuine respect, the kind of relationship built on seeing each other's full complexity and choosing to engage with all of it. They'd also started a foundation. Catherine Rivera's tragedy had haunted Adriana, the knowledge that good people got crushed by forces beyond their control. So she and Dominic created something to change that pattern. The Rivera Foundation provided legal support, financial assistance, and protection services for families targeted by organized crime, a way to transform their power from destructive to protective. Catherine herself ran the foundation's day-to-day operations. Her kids were in college now, thriving in their new lives, but Catherine had chosen to come back, to use her experience to help others facing similar nightmares. You gave me more than justice, Catherine told Adriana at the foundation's 5-year anniversary gala. You gave me purpose, a way to make Thomas's death mean something. You gave yourself purpose, Adriana corrected gently. I just made sure you had the platform and protection to pursue it. The gala was held in the same ballroom where Adriana had once stood silent and invisible. But now she moved through it with authority, greeting supporters and donors, delivering a keynote speech about transforming trauma into action, being fully and completely visible. Dominic watched from the side, his expression carrying the particular pride of a man who'd learned that empowering his partner made him stronger, not weaker. Near the end of the evening, Marcus approached them both. He'd been promoted to second in command of the organization, filling the role Carlo had held before retiring. He'd proven himself loyal, capable, and smart enough to adapt to the family's evolution. Boss. Adriana. Marcus used her name now, not a title. Recognition of her independent authority. Just got word from our contacts in the federal system. Vincent Moretti was spotted in Argentina, living under an assumed name, quiet life, no criminal activity. Good. Adriana's voice was firm. Let him stay disappeared. He lost everything that mattered. That's punishment enough. You don't want revenge after everything he did? Revenge is expensive and ultimately unsatisfying. Adriana turned to look at Dominic. We learned that lesson the hard way. Better to build something new than destroy something old. Marcus nodded, understanding. The organization had changed fundamentally under their joint leadership, less violent, more strategic, infinitely more stable. As the gala wound down, Adriana found herself back in the same spot where she'd stood 5 years ago, overhearing the conversation that changed everything. The same walls, the same floor, the same architectural space, but everything else was different. She wasn't decoration anymore, wasn't invisible or silent or small. She was Adriana Varelli Rinaldi, head of the most sophisticated intelligence network in the Eastern Seaboard. She was Nyx, undefeated racing legend. She was a foundation director who'd helped hundreds of families escape violence. She was a wife in a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and continuous evolution. She was everything she'd always been beneath the surface, finally able to exist in full dimension. Dominic joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. Thinking about that night? Always. It's the hinge point, The moment everything changed. Any regrets? Adriana considered the question seriously. The last 5 years had been complex, challenging, and rewarding in equal measure, building a new identity while maintaining her marriage, proving herself worthy of authority in a world that didn't naturally accept female power, learning to balance being Nyx and Adriana and all the complicated space between. But regrets? No. Not a single one. She turned to face him fully. You called me lifeless that night, and instead of breaking me, it freed me, gave me permission to stop trying to be what you wanted and start being who I actually was. So in a strange way, I'm grateful. Grateful that I was a dismissive ass. Grateful that you were honest enough to show me who you really thought I was, and strong enough to change your mind when I proved you wrong. She kissed him softly. Not many people can admit they were wrong and genuinely transform. You did. We both did. Yes, we both did. They stood together in the ballroom, surrounded by the ghosts of who they'd been and the reality of who they'd become. Two people who'd started as strangers in a forced marriage and had found their way to something genuine and powerful and entirely their own. Outside, the city lights spread out like possibilities. Somewhere in those lights, underground races were happening. Intelligence was being gathered. Foundations were helping families rebuild after trauma. The world they'd created together, half legitimate, half shadows, completely theirs. Adriana looked out at it all and smiled. The woman who'd been dismissed as decoration had become the engine driving everything forward. The silent wife had found her voice and used it to reshape power structures. The invisible woman had become impossible to ignore. And the best part? This was just the beginning. She had intelligence networks to expand, races to win, foundations to grow, a marriage to continue building into something unprecedented, a life to live in full dimension, no masks required, no apologies needed. She was Nyx. She was Adriana. She was everything in between and beyond. And she was never, ever going to be invisible again. Dominic pulled her closer, and they swayed together in the empty ballroom. Two partners who'd learned that the strongest empires weren't built on control and suppression, but on recognizing capability and empowering it to flourish. The chandelier above them caught the light, casting fractured brilliance across the polished floor. Adriana looked up at it, remembering the woman who'd stood beneath it years ago, silent and suffocating. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone fully alive, fully real, fully impossible to dismiss. The transformation was complete. The decoration had become the empire, and nothing would ever be the same again.